Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the Nine Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I'm Austin Lee. He's Alex Melio. We've been, vacationing a little for a couple of months, but if you're listening to our podcast here in February after the Super Bowl, you know there's no such thing as an NFL offseason. So we've been working hard on the side to prepare a lot of content for you guys, both on the upcoming draft prospects and then in a later episode, we're going to cover some of the free agents that are coming up in the coming weeks. So this episode, let's talk about the combine. Let's talk about all kinds of fun draft preview stuff. But first, Alex, I want to ask you how you've been with our 2 months off of podcasting. It's good to be back.
I've been resting my voice this entire time just for this moment. And now it's going away. No, I've been asleep for 2 months. I wish.
You went into hibernation.
Yes, I went into hibernation with two toddlers. With two toddlers. Yes.
Yeah.
Things are good. That was a great Super Bowl. I know we weren't podcasting throughout the playoffs, but it was a magnificent Super Bowl, and I thought it was a crazy ending, and that of course Nationwide depressed us all in the middle. By the way, the Nine Route brought to you by Nationwide. No, just kidding. Anyway, we're back.
It's good to be back. It's very good to be back. And it looks like you got new glasses, which is the most important event of the past 2 months, I would say.
Yes, I'm going with the trend here. I'm trying to be as hipster as possible with my eyewear.
Sweet. That you're on your way, buddy. You're well on your way.
I'm not quite as possible yet, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so we had the combine recently. Lots of running around and lifting weights and jumping and hopping and all those cool things. Let's talk about some of the prospects that we saw and some of the fantasy implications for where some of these guys may land. I mean, Alex, let's just pull back a second and talk about how do you look at the combine? What kind of value does it have as a NFL pundit? What sort of value does it have as a fantasy player?
Well, the combine is everything. If you do really well at the combine, you're going to be a star in the NFL. It's guaranteed 100%. That's my view on the combine. No, it's but
I don't believe you.
I think that there's definitely value in the combine. Obviously, if there wasn't, then we wouldn't do it. Some of it's a little bit, it's a dog and pony show. It's kind of the first event of the draft season where nationally people get to know some of the players, and yeah, we can glean like some of the metrics we see. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's Mock Draftable, which gives you great comps to other players and shows you where players stack up with each other. RotoViz. They do a lot of really good. They have a lot of great apps that kind of compare measurables and metrics. But in the end, it's just one part of the draft process. It'll kind of let us give us some insight as to some players who might have been under the radar, who are exploded at the combine, and be like, hey, we should take a look at his tape and see if we missed something. And at the same time, there are players who kind of don't do well at the combine, but it doesn't really matter. They're great players. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I think that Sigmund Bloom put it well on Twitter the other day. It's basically, it should sort of like shade your views of certain guys, but it's not the end-all be-all. It just sort of either colors something a little differently for you that you already suspected, or maybe makes you go look at a few things a little bit more back on the tape that maybe require a second viewing. But it shouldn't be this big sort of revolutionary mind-changing thing, I don't think.
Well, I changed my mind about every single player after I saw him.
you just flip to the opposite. It's like
yes.
All the guys you liked, you suddenly don't.
He's good. No, yeah. But some people value it more than others, and I think that I'm trying to. I always think that there's room for metrics and there's room for tape, and I think that the combine is kind of on the metric side. It'd be great if we saw them running pads, or kind of do something a little bit more football-y, aside from the drills. But anyway, let's move on to the prospects.
Sure, definitely. So let's talk about quarterbacks. Those are the ones that people love to talk about the most. And really, there's kind of two guys. This is a two-horse race here. It's Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. There's no one else here really fantasy relevant, or is there?
Well, so we have our Excel spreadsheet that you and I have made for this show, and we have the list of quarterbacks, and on our notes we have notes for Jameis Winston and for Mariota, and then on the rest of our notes I said none of these guys will be fantasy relevant anytime soon. Maybe Brett Hundley because he's got great athleticism and maybe he's a backup that gets pressed into action next year or something. But I think that it is a top two horse race here.
Yeah, and do you think that so there's no like sixth or seventh round guy like a Tom Brady hiding in here as far as we can tell? This is actually kind of a big drop off from these two guys.
You never know. There could be the next Tom Brady in this draft, and I actually wrote an article a couple weeks ago for Bleacher Report talking about it. If there was a new Tom Brady, which I think it's impossible. We could talk about Brady's career another time, but somebody that comes out of nowhere, out of the 6th or 7th round, this would be the draft to be it because there's not really a lot at the top. Though if you look at Brady's draft, he had 1 first rounder and then two third rounders, I think. And then a few 5th and 6th rounders before we got to Brady. And, in this draft, it's probably going to be the same. We're going to have 2 first rounders, maybe 1 second rounder, and then, on and so forth. But having said all that, we didn't see what Brady could do for a little while. He didn't come in and start right away, and he didn't become a fantasy stud for several years. It was a lot of dink and dunk, dink and dunk. Dink and dunk.
Dunkin' Donuts. It was a lot of Dunkin' Donuts.
A lot of Dunkin' Donuts. Well, they are in Boston, but anyway. So, yeah, I'm done.
Well, so my question about the top 2 guys here is, what's the furthest realistically that they'll fall? I don't see them falling into the second half of the first round. These guys will probably be gone. What, in the first 10 picks? How far do you think they might fall?
I think Jameis Winston's going to go number 1. I mean, there's a lot of smoke around the Buccaneers drafting him, and I think he answered a lot of questions about his personality at the combine. There was a lot of positive things said about him. Somebody mentioned that he had Peyton Manning like football IQ to really high praise. We hear a lot of hyperbole this time of year, but he nailed his interviews. He did well in the drills. In the quarterback drills, he didn't show any athleticism, but that doesn't matter. I don't think that matters because he's not a guy that's going to run the ball. There's some people are kind of making a big deal about the fact that he ran a 5-second 40-yard dash, and I don't care. Tom Brady ran it in over 5 seconds. So I think he's going to go number 1, and where Marcus Mariota lands is a little bit more of a question.
Yeah, with Winston, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of talk about off the field stuff, crab legs, this, profanities, that. One of the more interesting ones to me, though, is actually, will he play baseball? Does that concern you at all?
I think he's going to be focused on football, at least at the beginning of his career. I mean, he mentioned that this is the first time he's actually trained for football beyond the football season. He usually switches right to baseball, and he hasn't done that this year. He's obviously not playing for FSU. Maybe he gets drafted and he gives it a shot, but I don't think that's going to happen this summer. Maybe in a couple of years he'll give it a shot, but for this year I wouldn't call it a concern at all. The off the field stuff, yeah, there's the really serious allegation, which it's really we shouldn't really touch on that. That's something that probably will not affect his draft stock at this point. It seems like he was cleared, and from all intents, or from what it looks like in the NFL, it looks like everything. They're moving on from it. But I think the Bucs are going to take him.
Yeah. So where do you think that Mariota falls here? The Oregon quarterback. He's a more mobile quarterback. Do you think that he falls all the way to St. Louis at 10? Does he go earlier than that?
I think that the furthest he's going to fall is the 6th pick. I think that the Jets at number 6 are serious contenders to take him. I think he's going to go before that. I mean, I honestly think the Titans should take him, but I have this feeling that they think Zach Mettenberger is the answer there, which is to what question, I don't know. But I think that he could go anywhere between 2 and 6. Obviously the Raiders, they might not take him. They have Derek Carr. And the Jaguars, they have Blake Bortles, so they're not going to take him. But anybody could trade in there. I think the Rams might trade up. I've heard that Chip Kelly really loves him. He would have to probably trade up into the top 5 to get him. It would kind of be impossible for the Eagles to get him, unless something drastic happens in the next couple months. I mean, he's really good. I mean, there's some knocks against him, system quarterback this, and he didn't make all the throws and all that, but he looked great at the combine. Not only was he the most athletic quarterback by far, but he looked great in the quarterback drills. He showed that he could make a lot of NFL throws.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's move along to running backs. There's a very deep running back class this year, and we'll cover it in our next episode. There's actually a really deep free agency running back selection as well. I'm wondering if that's going to suppress the value of these guys to the point where maybe they fall even further than we've seen them fall in previous drafts. So what do you think about the running back value at large here this year?
I don't think they're going to fall. I think that we might see a first-round running back. We hadn't seen him in the last couple of drafts. Yes, value overall is down, but there's a couple of guys that could knock on the first-round door. It depends on Todd Gurley. He's kind of the consensus number 1 running back, but he had the torn ACL last year, and so teams might be scared off by that. But I mean, he tore it November, I believe. There's a good chance he'll play a big chunk of the 2015 season. You know how nowadays people recover quicker from that sort of thing. But there's risk there, so he might fall into the second round. Maybe one or two running backs will go ahead of him. Melvin Gordon, he looked great at the combine, tested really well. He looked every bit as explosive as some people expected. So he could hit the first round. And we got also Amir Abdullah. He looked fantastic for Nebraska. He's kind of a dark horse to go in the first round. A guy that not a lot of people talk about. He's got a little bit of size concerns, but there's a few guys there that could go in the first round.
Yeah, I like Gordon in the first round. I think we're going to see him go in the first round. But it could be 2 or 3 guys that go in the first round this year. Lots of great running backs to choose from. What about you're a Miami Hurricanes fan. What about Duke Johnson? Let's go a little further down the list. What do you think about him?
There's a lot of talk about him being undersized, and I've been kind of banging the table for him on Twitter because he's 5'9", 207. That's not small. That's Frank Gore, when he was at the Combine, was 5'9", 205. The same exact size. They have a little bit different body types, and somebody pointed that out to me, and they both ran in the 4.5s in the 40-yard dash as well. So it's like they're very similar. They tested very similarly. They have very similar measurables. They're different players. Duke Johnson's more of a pass catcher. Of course, Frank Gore gained probably 15 pounds since he entered the NFL, so there's nothing to preclude Johnson from doing that and becoming more of a 3-down back. There's some concern that he might be just a passing down guy, which might be the case for his rookie year, but I think he'll be great in the NFL. He's an explosive player.
Nice. And what about Boise State's Jay Ajayi? Is he a guy that, is like a second-round guy, maybe a third-round guy? Where does he fall into this?
He tested pretty well at the Combine. There's a lot of buzz around him. I think he could probably, he could get into the second round, but, we're getting to the point where it's a little bit saturated in the second round now, and it would, teams would really need, a lot of teams would really have to feel the need for a running back, I think, for him to go. But he's kind of he was an under-the-radar guy, for the most part, heading into the Combine, and he looked pretty good.
Are there any other running backs here on this list, anyone maybe further down the list that jumps out at you that you're like, I like this guy more than other guys, or it might be I got to keep an eye on maybe fantasy-wise, depending on where he lands?
I think that I don't necessarily like him more than other guys, but David Johnson, he looked fantastic at the Combine. He's one of the best running backs at the Combine, and I think that if you look at his tape, he's kind of a big pass-catching guy. He's got a little bit of work to do in the running game, but he looks great catching the ball, and he could be kind of a third down back early, maybe with some, he's a big guy too, so maybe he'll get some goal line work, but it depends on where he lands, obviously.
Yeah, and that's a good point in general. It's like we want to kind of give a little preview of some of these guys to be on the lookout for. But more importantly is going to be after the draft when we see some of these guys and what situations they land in. Obviously scouting their talent is a big deal, like saying well, Bishop Sankey landed in a good situation, but he doesn't look that great. Or some of these guys who have great talent landing in good situations. We'll be interested to see that, and we'll obviously cover that in depth after the draft. What about wide receivers? Let's talk about kind of the big 3 that are getting kicked around. Seem to be Amari Cooper of Alabama, Kevin White, West Virginia, and Devontae Parker of Louisville. Those guys to me are sort of in a tier by themselves, with maybe one other possibility. How do you view this wide receiver class?
I think Amari Cooper and Kevin White could both go in the top 10. And I think that Kevin White kind of blew everybody away at the combine. Not a lot of people expected him to run a 4.35 40 at 6'3" and 215 pounds. So, between those two guys, I think that Kevin White kind of has a little bit more upside just because he's a bigger guy and he definitely has more athleticism, but he's more raw than Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's a more polished guy. So, I don't think you can go wrong with either guy. And again, it depends on where they land. If they land in New York, if one of them lands in New York with Geno Smith at quarterback, he's not doing much as a rookie, most likely. So, you got to keep an eye on where they land. And then Devontae Parker's kind of fell a little bit back, in kind of the national mind's eye, I guess you could say. But he's still a guy that can probably go in the top 15.
Yeah, I would be interested to see Amari Cooper end up in Oakland at that 4th pick, maybe with David Carr thrown to him. I'm not saying that Carr's amazing quarterback, but he did show some signs last year of if he had maybe better pass catchers, something interesting could happen there. So that could be an interesting landing spot for a guy like Cooper, who's sort of safe and a little more NFL ready maybe in his rookie year, and not a lot of competition in that receiving core. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a good landing spot, and we did see some glimpses from Derek Carr that could give his receivers some serious fantasy value. We saw James Jones have some major PPR games last year. Of course, that was kind of a function of Derek Carr kind of going to his main read on short routes. But yeah, I mean, with a guy like Amari Cooper who could break things deep, I think Oakland's a pretty good spot for him, and I'm looking at some other teams that could use, there's a lot of teams in the top 10 that need defensive help. So, it would be interesting to see if one of these guys falls out just because, like the Bears, the Falcons, the Giants, they all need defensive help. The Rams maybe could use a wide receiver, but they just took Tavon Austin a couple years ago. I'm not sure that, they'll go that route. But anybody could also trade up into the top 10.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see some trades up for some receivers. Yeah, and it sounds like St. Louis might be trying to re-sign Kenny Britt as well. Not that he's some superstar, but they may be banking on receiver help elsewhere. I think I said David Carr instead of Derek Carr.
Did you say? I was like David. Did you say David Carr?
I think I did say David Carr. Yeah.
David Carr. He's still in our minds.
Yeah. I did not see anything good out of David Carr last year. Just to clarify. Let's talk about.
Gave me some really good fries at Burger King last year.
Oh gosh!
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was awful. I'm sorry, David Carr. Anyway.
Yes, David Carr sitting on his couch. What the heck? What did I do to you, Alex? What the crap?
I drafted you 6 years ago. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you burned me 10 years ago. So another receiver that's interesting is Oklahoma receiver Dorial Green-Beckham. He seems to be like off the charts, upside, and then people are sort of like questioning whether maybe his head's in the right space to be a good NFL pick. What is your take here? Is he too risky, or are you like, no, upside, let's get this guy?
I mean, I think that he needs to have like a strong locker room. He needs to land in a good situation. He's kind of got that Dez Bryant feel to him, right? Dez Bryant came into the NFL, and there were some questions about his character, and he's got like Calvin Johnson upside. I mean, at least size-wise, he's 6'5", 237. Didn't quite run as fast as Johnson at the combine, but he's a guy with a lot of talent, and if he lands in the right situation, he could be a big contributor right away as long as he keeps his head on straight.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've been impressed with a guy like Dez Bryant, who I wasn't so sure about at first, but he's turned that fiery passion that he has, I feel like, around into being a leader for that Cowboys team. And it's been really impressive to watch over the past couple of years. I hope he lands back in Dallas. I like seeing him play for the Cowboys.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this whole. We'll talk about Dez Bryant in our next episode.
Yes. There's a little tease for the free agency preview. Exactly. Let's see. Oh, how about Sammy Coates? I'm an Auburn fan, and so I've watched him play the past couple of years. I tend to be. What's that?
I was going to say, I'll defer to you since you've watched him play a lot.
Yeah, I tend to be pessimistic about players on my favorite teams, so I'll just that's my bias, so I'll just put that out there. But I do have some concerns about Coates playing well at the NFL level. I think that he'll be a good contributor, but I don't think that a team needs to go all in on his sort of physical upside, because I think he does have some kinks to his game that he still needs to work out. He hasn't caught a ton of passes over the past couple of years. Compared to like Cooper, who caught whatever 50% more than
his
did.
his offense was also a really run-heavy offense, so there's that to consider.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And so he had some drop issues. He was banged up a little bit this past year. So I like Sammy Coates and I like what he did at Auburn, but I'm not going over the moon to try to get this guy at the NFL level. I think he's going to be a decent player, but not a guy that's going to light it up, even though he has some physical attributes that might seem like he could do that. Are there any other receivers here that stand out to you, maybe further down the list, that are exciting to you or maybe have a lot of upside?
Well, I think Rashad Green out of Florida State, he's got a little bit undersized at 5'11", 182, a little bit smaller than I expected, and but he's a really, really good route runner. Somebody's kind of a polished guy that's ready to come in and contribute. I thought I saw somebody compare him to Greg Jennings, and I think they're pretty similar size. So, he's a guy that could go in the second or third round that could be kind of a sneaky good rookie. And also Philip Dorsett out of Miami. A lot of people expected him to run the fastest 40. He had the third fastest. Was really good. Had a pretty good day, and he looked great in the drills. I think that having watched him play in Miami the past several years, he was the guy that was kind of underutilized. I felt he had some injuries too, but kind of a intriguing guy who he's the same exact size as Antonio Brown, not the same receiver, but he's kind of some people say he's has size concerns, but Antonio Brown is doing just fine.
Yeah, and I've seen some other guys like Jalen Strong pretty high on people's draft boards. It sounds like he's getting some sort of Larry Fitzgerald comps. And I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's a fair comp, or obviously it's a little bit much to compare, an incoming rookie to a guy that's an all-pro.
Yeah, I mean he's not Larry Fitzgerald, but he's got kind of similar size and build. So, and I think Larry Fitzgerald has spoken with him, about getting to the next level. But he's a guy with a lot of upside, who's kind of a bit raw. But I think he could also be a big contributor, maybe a red zone threat. He's pretty big, 6'2", 217.
Yeah. What do you say we move on to tight ends? I'm kind of hesitant because that's not, kind of like quarterbacks. I don't feel like there's a whole lot in the tight end group.
Never. I'm telling you this now. I tell everybody this every year. Never draft a rookie tight end in fantasy football.
Yeah.
Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez were outliers that year. There's no reason to draft a rookie tight end. They almost never pan out.
Yeah, this is a dynasty outlook sort of situation. This is not a rookie year situation. Now, what if Julius Thomas goes away from the Broncos and the Broncos draft one of these guys? Even then, you're like, I still can't take him, even though
I fully expect Jacob Tamme to catch 15 touchdowns if that happens.
Oh, God. You heard it here first. Jacob Tamme is Alex's big sleeper for 2015.
I mean, there might be like one or two situations. The Peyton Manning is probably the one situation where I might draft a rookie tight end if it's a guy that was drafted highly, and Julius Thomas is gone, because Manning loves tight ends, and so we've seen him make Dallas Clark a star, we've seen him make Jacob Tamme a star, and now Julius Thomas, and if Clive Walford or Max Williams go to the Broncos, okay, maybe, but that's kind of a late round flyer for me.
Yeah, I would agree. And it sounds like that Max Williams is sort of the guy that's at the top of everybody's tight end board, and he's got 2 X's in his max, so he's like extra extreme. That's pretty awesome. I like that. I think if I named my kid Max, he'd have like 3 X's.
You can get excited about Max Williams. He's kind of a big play guy, and I'm just saying now, you're gonna get let down if you draft a rookie tight end, you're gonna get let down.
Yep, I agree. I don't think I would do it even with the Broncos. I mean, it's like, yeah, Jacob Tamme's there. Virgil Green is there. They're trying to, I think, bring him back. And so, it could be a full house over there. Yep, with Bob Saget and everything. How about Jesse James? He's got a cool name, a cool Western name.
Yeah.
I'm all about the names. That's my thing. I'm all about the names.
Well, Jesse James is a big guy. He's 6'7", 261, and he had a pretty good combine, but he seems kind of more like a blocking tight end. So I'm not sure that. I mean, he's kind of a long-term pick. Again, we're talking dynasty, I guess. So if you like a 6'7" guy that might catch several touchdowns just by mere virtue of being taller than everybody else, then yeah, he's a pretty good investment in the third round or so.
Yeah, and it sounds like he really wowed people at the combine, but again, like the combine isn't everything.
Yeah.
And here's an interesting one to kind of backtrack a little bit. Devin Funchess is sort of wide receiver, tight end. He's kind of floats in between a little bit. It sounds like maybe he might get drafted as like a move tight end as opposed to a wide receiver. What do you think about him? Do you think that he's got more tight end in his game or wide receiver?
Well, he certainly showed like he's got more athleticism. Compared to he looks more like a tight end. The way he tested at the combine, he ran like a 4.7 40. Didn't quite look like a wide receiver in terms of all the metrics. So yeah, I think that he's kind of got a future as a tight end. The problem is that if you shift him, he's a big guy, 6'4", 232, right? And that's really big for wide receiver. You shift him over to tight end, that's not so big. That's. It's kind of being a tweener is tough. I think that maybe he's got really good. He high points the ball well. He makes some pretty big catches sometimes. But at the next level, I'm not so sure that's going to translate. At least at tight end, maybe he just had a bad combine and he'll test better at pro day or anything or something. He does have talent. I'm not saying he doesn't have talent, but if he does move to tight end, I don't expect him to have like a big rookie year or anything.
Yeah, he'll be an interesting one to watch and see if some coaches can figure out a good way to scheme for him and get him involved in their system. Any other thoughts on this draft class or the combine or the draft that's down the line before we wrap things up?
It's early. I would say it's really exciting. There's no offseason. The MFL 10s are going on. People are drafting rookies, and that's all great. But just be careful with rookies, especially if you're drafting MFL 10s. You don't have any idea right now where anybody's going to land. So he might be the most talented running back in the world. If he lands in a spot where there's two guys ahead of him, he's going to be useless. So that's why it's a real risk to take them. And the other thing I would say is, I've seen some talk about this year's wide receiver class being just as good as last year's, and that might happen, but I don't think that's going to happen. Last year's class was the best ever, statistically and just looking at them. And Odell Beckham he missed the first 4 games of the year. So and I don't think this year's class is going to come close to matching them. So be careful. Don't buy into last year's statistics with this year's receivers.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I feel like last year's receivers, we still haven't seen some of them perform at their best. I think there's still some guys from last year's rookie class that are going to show up big time this year who were a little quieter last year. So I think that's great advice there. Well, that's all we have for this particular episode. But be sure.
Right back.
Oh, yeah. We will be right back
for
another episode of free agency preview coming up in a couple of weeks. So in the meantime, though, go check out our website at the9route.com. We appreciate your ratings. That helps us out a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thanks for sticking with us, even though we took a little 2-month break. If you want to reach Alex on Twitter, he's at AlexMelio. I am at AustinNFL. And until next time, may your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.